All right. Welcome, everyone that has come to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting this evening. I'd like to go ahead and get started. Thank you for all the commissioners coming tonight. I don't see any reason not to get started. So we'll start as we always do with the approval of the minutes from our last meeting from January 22nd, 2024. If you've had time to review, if you see any amendments that are needed or changes, please note, or we would look for a motion to approve.
I make a motion.
Thank you, Wim. Second?
Second.
Lacy, second. Go ahead and roll call for it, please.
Adam Brown,
Aye.
Lacey Colbert. Aye. Pete Renfro,
Aye.
Trevor Brandt,
Aye.
Jeff Garrison,
Aye.
Todd Goldberg is absent, Chad Zickerby,
Aye.
Alexis Pavlov is absent, and Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. We have no scheduled visitors or guests to speak. We have no unfinished business, so we'll move right into our new business. Letter A, which is amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 405, zoning regulations by enacting one new section, 405.080, neighborhood meetings. Cameron?
Yes, at the last meeting, staff had provided a draft of the ordinance just to kind of highlight some of the changes that we had made since the last draft. We updated the logo. There was some reference to public hearings. We changed to public meetings because the official hearing in our ordinance is at the board. Made that change. There were some minor updates to clarify that it's on the developer or the applicant, not necessarily staff to submit some of the stuff. So we clarified that as well. But just kind of hitting the highlights and giving the commission some history, as may only be a couple of you that was here the first time. But beginning in 2020, staff had started working on this proposed ordinance. What we were seeing was there was items that were being discussed or requested to be discussed at the public meetings that was irrelevant to the application as far as reviewing the application and making recommendation of approval or denial. But again, there was concerns being brought up at topics at those meetings, such as details of the application. For instance, if it was zoning, there was cases where the audience was asking for detailed stormwater analysis, traffic studies, site plans, consultant drawings that just wasn't required information for a zoning case. And so staff was proposing this ordinance. We did model this from the Springfield ordinance that's been in place for quite some time. In going through this process, this ordinance would be required for any applications that is an annexation, a zoning change, a planned unit development, a vacation of right of way that's not initiated by the city, and conditional use of permits. The neighborhood meetings shall be held at least 20 days prior to the Planning Zoning Commission meeting. The notice is to be sent by the applicant to the neighboring property owners that has property within 500 feet of the applicant's property. The meeting is not scheduled or planned to be attended by city staff, the commission, or the board. It's an independent meeting between the applicant and the surrounding neighbors. The applicant shall provide documentations and a summary of this meeting to the staff, to include in our staff report to the commission, which then goes on to the board. The meeting would allow citizens to ask questions and bring up concerns, such as what I addressed earlier, that potentially could be resolved prior to coming to the public meeting. In August of 2020, the Planning Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this ordinance to the board. However, the proposed ordinance went to the Board of Aldermen and was tabled on October 5th of 2020 with discussions to remove the requirement for annexations as part of the neighborhood meeting process. Following that table, staff did make that revision to the board. And then at the next meeting that it came up, there were several other items that brought up concerns, such as and this was, again, keep in mind, this was during that pandemic time. We're doing a lot of electronic meetings. They asked about having these meetings electronically instead of in person, security current concerns, cost concerns, additional requirements on developers, concerns of needing attendance by non-developer or neighbors representation, an accurate account of the meeting summary, online forum to submit comments as opposed to in-person meetings. Proposed ordinance would allow neighbors to have a voice and additional regulations. Following that Board of Aldermen tabling that meeting, there was a continued tabling for indefinite time and no action has been pursued. Again, the thought process behind this meeting was that, or this required neighborhood meeting would allow those citizens to come to that independent meeting before the public meetings to ask those questions specifically in regards to the specifics of their application. There's no requirements of what is to be conveyed. It's up to that applicant to sell their story or propose their story. Staff in addition to the ordinance, we are asking for a meeting summary to be submitted and signed by the applicant. In addition, we've kind of got an outlined process of how these meetings to occur. Any notes about the meeting, what was discussed and how the potential concerns would be addressed. We did provide an example notice that city would provide to the applicant to send to the neighbors. And then the last thing on this, the neighborhood meeting would occur. Staff is recommending in that late evening, early evening timeframe, or I guess late afternoon, early evening timeframe, so that the neighbors could get there. If they work, they can come after work, or if they want to choose to go before dinner and they don't work that late, then maybe they can do that. So we are requiring that they have those kind of those last 2 hours of the evening to catch the before and after work. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
There's a change to the code. We only up to the public for any comments for this application. If you would like to speak to it, please come forward. And state your name and address.
Hi, my name's Don Fleury, 1825 East Cottage, Ozark. I know the intentions of this seem well and good, but I'm going to speak from my personal experience on doing development here in Ozark. We were under a timetable of moving our warehouse from Springfield into Ozark. And when we purchased the property, it was under a contingency before we closed on the property to go through the zoning and planning process. So I wanted to kind of dive into the weeds so you guys can see a perspective from a business or a developer. One thing that we did first, we did reach out to our neighbors and, introduced ourselves and did the due diligence, and we had no problems, no opposition. So ours was pretty lightweight compared to some of the others that you may have experienced. But if there was something in place like this, it's a layer of a delay. And what could happen potentially is if you have a 60-day or 90-day, whatever the zoning allowance is for your real estate contract, and there's opposition or a layer in the cake, you could potentially have a developer that could fall under breach of contract for closing within a time frame. They have to renegotiate that closing, and you can see kind of the waterfall effects that happen from this. Furthermore, in the cost structure of it, that would require engineers to be present most generally to represent the developer. Evenings, late evenings, things of that nature could also add development issues and to the community could pose an attitude of it's more difficult to build in Ozark, and it could push businesses to elsewhere that doesn't have a step in the process like this. There all are alternatives that I spoke with Jared Davis earlier today. He's our civil engineer and has experience running through this with Springfield. So from his perspective, in the 12 years that he's dealt with this in Springfield, only about 5% of the meetings are attended. So it's a lot of work and a lot of things to happen for not a lot of participation. The 5% that do show up are going to have those issues when it goes to zoning and planning either way. There wasn't anything that persuaded some of these projects because the mindset of the public was already made up. So there's not a lot of good that comes out of it for the red tape that has to go through it. from his perspective. But he offered some good alternatives that made some sense on a kind of per case basis. So instead of having a blanket rule that applies to all applicants and all rezoning, maybe the zoning could recommend or penalize when they know there is going to be issues, and then there's additional delays because they didn't hold that meeting when it was recommended. So I don't know the infrastructures or things that could happen along that lines, but instead of affecting all developments and all rezones, maybe a per case basis would be a better step forward for the community. Thank you.
Sir. Anyone else?
Jeannie McFall, 1324 East Warren Avenue, Ozark, Missouri. I've listened to this previously. I think it's a really bad ordinance because it's mandatory. It affects all annexations, all zoning changes, planned unit development, and abandoning public right-of-way change. All annexations could mean one house just wanting to connect to sewer. I don't think they need to have a public meeting, rent a space, pay for security, and send out to 500 people, 500 feet radius compared to 185 that you require now for your notice. So change that, change it to 500 feet if that's what the purpose is, to notify more people. Like he said, the added time and expenses to notify all these people, the time to rent a place, possibly even pay for security. You have a police officer here now at your request. This may be required at these public meetings, neighborhood meetings. And a lot of times the owners do not know your rules when they would have a meeting like this. They don't know what the city ordinances are to be able to explain it to the public. So how is that going to be handled when the people ask questions and they can't answer the questions? At the mayor's meeting, we had some suggestions, possibly a cover letter detailing more of what's going on with the applicant, not hiding the agenda behind several different pages, or even the link for this or for the zoning change. Because when I went to find it, it's not on the front page. Under planning and zoning, there's nothing there that says this is in the process of being rezoned to be able to find it easily. Possibly putting a QR code on the sign with a link so that when they drive by and they see a zoning change, they could just link to that to find out the details. But you're going to have some people out in the county that won't even try to annex into the city if they have a sewer problem, because it's going to be easier to put in a new septic tank than it is to come in the city. So think about that. And the concern I have is the word mandatory for one lot. Think about that. You've done that numerous times. There's somebody up by the rivers. They needed sewer, one lot joined the city limits, they got sewer. And you're expecting them to go through all this. Another one that's probably going to come up is you guys rezoned some property there on NN. They wanted it to go back to residential. It was C2. The reason they wanted residential is to get a better loan. Now they have it for sale. It says it's commercial zoned on the sign. It is not, but they would have to come to you to be able to have it rezoned, and think about the time frame it's going to be able to do that. There's just other ways. I think if you're going to do this, it should be optional, not mandatory.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. My name is Anna Evans. I am with Show Me Christian County, which of course is the economic development organization for Christian County, and also, of course, work very closely with City of Ozark, city staff, especially in planning and development and public works. Wanted to
Could
first
you
of all
give
say,
your address, please?
oh, sorry, 113 East Church Street, Ozark. First of all, wanted to say thank you to the Planning and Zoning Commission for and again the city staff. I know this has been a long process and there's been a lot of revisions and revisiting of the topic. You know, having worked on it since 2020, that's a long time. So thank you all for being willing to take a look at the process and try to, you know, make improvements that make it a better process for everyone and better outcomes. We do appreciate your time a whole lot. We have been since the agenda was placed online, and folks have been checking out what's going on with planning and zoning. There have been several folks in our, you know, whether on the development side or on the, I don't know, related vendor side, architects, engineers, things like that, that have contacted Show Me to express some, concerns, I guess would be the right word. And I think a lot of that boils down to a few things that maybe just some amendment or some change to the language of the proposed ordinance would help fix and I think would help ease everyone's minds. The first one, when you look at the proposed language and then the accompanying documents with it, the sample letter that would be sent out, the kind of meeting report template, things like that. There's nothing in the materials that indicate or give the developer the assurance that they would be able to conduct this public meeting, potentially have their engineer, you know, speak on their behalf or what have you. And the reason that I bring that up is because we've had some concerns about confidentiality. So if you have a business who has purchased a plot of land and they're going through the rezone process, but maybe they're not quite ready to make a public announcement about who they are or what brand they represent, if there is some language that helps indicate and ease the mind of that, you know, developer or what have you, that brand that maybe they, you know, they don't have to come and throw up a sign on that piece of property quite yet that says, you know, XYZ retailer is coming. They still have this whole process to get through first, before they're really ready for that information to be public. And so that was a concern that we have heard. Second, was specifically some of the language in the supporting materials. I think the letter was a good example, but it's talked specifically about negotiation with neighbors. And that I think gave a lot of people pause. I think the neighbors ultimately, I think this whole process wants to be able to take the neighborhood, you know, character and history and all of that into account. But ultimately for developers, whether it is, you know, a actual commercial development or even whether it's, you know, a person in a residential area, wants to be able to not have to feel like they are answering to, I guess, the neighbors. Of course, the neighbors can have an opinion, but I think the language about negotiation with neighbors has given some people some pause, because it's like, you know, I'll just be frank. The sentiment is, you know, it's private property and these are my plans to do XYZ and we want to be accommodating, but that's you know, all in the spirit of being good neighbors. But I think the negotiation language has given some people some pause. And then finally, the perception of the development process, as Dawn alluded to, Ozark. And I will say, for especially the past few years, I really do think Ozark, the city, and the various boards and commissions have done a good job in implementing and trying to address the public perception maybe from quite long ago that Ozark is very difficult to work with. And I know that you all have heard that, you know, quite often, many times from folks who haven't actually done a development in Ozark for quite some time. You know, maybe it's been several years since someone has come and done a project, and yet their perception still to this day remains, you know, oh, I had difficulties, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so in my mind, Ozark is still difficult to work with. I really do think the city, the staff, like I said, the board, the commissions have done a good job of going back and looking at, you know, being willing to look at ordinances and say, hey, let's make a change to this process. Let's make this more user friendly. Let's make sure that our language is up to date and modernized how it needs to be. So I think that the perception of adding the additional mandatory requirement in all cases is not something that continues to help Ozark go down that trajectory of an improved kind of open for business type, friendly, easy to do business with community. So that's the feedback I have, and I would be happy to answer any questions. But again, thank you all for your time. I know it's been a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing much movement, so I'll go ahead and close the public portion of our meeting here and turn it over to the commission for comments, questions of any kind. It's your turn. Go ahead, Chad. Uh-oh, are you dead? Hmm. Must be special. Talk real loud. Good.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Chad.
I had a few questions. First, I'll start with staff first. Cameron, I believe I heard you say that this new ordinance for neighborhood meetings, that it was not required for annexation. Is that correct?
Currently, the ordinance that staff brought back to the commission is what was originally approved by the commission that does require that. What happened is when it got to the Board of Aldermen, the annexation was removed. However, it was continued to be tabled and never pursued. So at one point in time, yes, once it got past the commission before, annexation was removed. The thought process behind that, generally, if you have an annexation, you'll have a zoning. So you'll catch the neighborhood meeting one way or the other. Or however, on the flip side, if you're going to have an annexation and zoning, you're going to just do both meetings at one time. So yes, at one time it was in there, then it was removed in a proposed amendment. However, that never got adopted.
So is it safe to say that if someone is annexing into the city from the county, are they going to be required to rezone into city zoning?
The way the city annexation and zoning works, if you annex in from the county, you come in as a county zoning. However, if you want to do anything on that property, you've got to rezone it. So 99% of the time, the annexations do have a zoning application with those. I think the only time that possibly might not have that, for instance, like a one lot that wants to tap to a sewer connection, there has been times when they might choose to leave the county zoning in place. Or they might just want to annex the land in just to market that land and not develop that.
Okay. Where did the 500 feet come from as far as notifying the neighbors? Was that from the Springfield
Yes,
ordinance, or?
that came from the Springfield example as thinking it would capture more people in that area. What we see the attendance in the public meetings, a lot of times it is neighbors that's beyond that original 185 that the notification goes out for the state statute. So we thought maybe the 500 would just help address and capture more people.
Sure. And then, the city will provide the applicant with the list of names and mailing addresses.
The list is still provided by the applicant, just as the 185 is. You get that from the county. You'll give the property location, whether it's the parcel number or address. The county assessor's office will, in the mapping, will create that list. And then that applicant would provide that to us to confirm that they've captured all those.
Okay. All right. I have a couple other comments, but maybe I'll just hold them till the end. So that's all the questions I have now.
Thank you, Chad. Anyone else?
What are vacations of public right of way?
A street, public right away that was for a street. Some cases, the street was never constructed. It may have been platted. That's most cases what we see. Or in some of the areas of downtown, there's been some areas that lots over time had just developed over right away that was never established as far as construction. So that's what those vacations right away would be.
Go ahead, Adam, you got them.
Yeah, on number 5, I know that it's held on the property involved or immediate vicinity or nearby. Is there any sort of I mean, it's like you don't want to restrict people, but somebody's interpretation of nearby, you know, is there any? I'm just thinking of any objections to a meeting that, you know, if there's any language we could add, if, you know, if it would have to be within the city limits, you'd have to have a meeting or anything like that that would make it any less wiggle room for like, well, they held a meeting here or there.
Yes, generally, we do recommend they be near the public or the property site or on that site, but a lot of cases they may be outside. And so with the weather, we'd probably encourage those to be indoor. If it's at a resident, we wouldn't want those to be inside the residential home. So if the applicant, depending on the location of the city, it would be wise to have those within the city limits. But if they want to look at trying to find a facility that's more public, such as the rec center, maybe a church, something like that, just let us know and what's going on, just so we can document that.
Yeah, well.
Go ahead, Trevor.
My only concern with this is that in considering whether to approve an annexation or a rezoning, we have to take certain things into consideration, such as the plan and the suitability of the site for the zoning or annexation. And my concern is that this might be placing an additional burden on developers, property owners, for things that may not necessarily be included in our decision-making process. That's just one concern that I have.
That's a very valid concern, as that's kind of what started this discussion a few years ago. We're at the public meetings, the commission board, we were seeing the request of the applicants to actually supply that information, and staff encouraged them to focus on the annexation, what you need to be looking at, the zoning specific, and not get beyond that requirement. But on the flip side, this would allow those neighbors around there to ask those questions. We're not requiring the applicant to convey anything any more than they want to. It's just an opportunity to give that dialogue to those neighbors, to have that open conversation that might appease some of their concerns.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Is there anything wrong with having virtual meetings? Or has that been brought up? Because I could see that just being a lot more feasible for the public, for the contractor, or whoever that person is, just having a lot of time. You know, I think in this day and age, it's a pretty common practice to have that type of meeting. So I think that should be considered.
Definitely something that can be considered at the time of drafting this. A few years ago, that wasn't really thought of. I would think it'd be a little hard to kind of have that dialogue because the interruption, so you'd have to actually give a presentation. In some cases, when I've had to prepare and have these meetings as a consultant, there really is no formality to this. It's pretty open, come and go as you will, however you want to set it up. So I think if it was virtual, you'd actually have to formally have a presentation and try to one-on-one ask questions, or just do it maybe through a chat and answer those. But it's definitely something that could be looked at and evaluated.
Timeline wise, as of right now, for somebody to come before us for a zoning change or an annexation, how long before the meeting do they have to submit all
So-
of their paperwork?
Yeah, so what we're requiring is them to have the meeting, I slipped off the top of my head, but so many days prior to the planning and zoning meeting, I think
Well, I
it's
know that I see
15.
the meeting time, but just as of right now, just to submit their documents to get on the agenda.
Generally,
you
it takes about 5 weeks or so to get on the agenda. And once we get an application, get through the review and get the packet ready, that's about roughly what it takes.
Yes, okay. So this would just be happening at the same time as all of that, because it's usually at least 30 days to get.
Yes, it would
on the agenda.
be incorporated in with that application deadline, which starts kind of your time frame of getting on the agenda, and it's set up to occur within all those days.
Another question, Cameron. If we, like we mentioned that the board had discussions tabled, nothing happened, comes back here. If we were to pass something like this and it goes to the board again, obviously it could be tabled again, but are they able to make changes? And then if they do, will it come back around to us?
Yes, they definitely can propose changes if they would like to. No guarantees it wouldn't get tabled again. Really depends on the board's preference, whether they want to make those changes, move forward, or send it back to the commission.
Okay, and so then my question next would be the impetus for creating, another regulation like this. What's the motivating factor for getting this? As far as has this been a citizens, developers, city, they're trying to where's the motivation for adding this coming from?
This is more internal to the city, not applicants, developers, or citizens. However, back when this was discussed prior, a lot of neighboring residents that would come to these meetings were asking for more information that just wasn't provided or required for consideration of an application.
Right. Okay.
Chairman, I'll ask a question concerning the, I'm sorry, give me just a moment. Referring back to the annexation issue, would it be possible to, I'm not sure how to word this, exclude annexations from the meeting requirement, but yet if it's an annexation accompanied by a zoning, to require it? Or would it simply just be requiring it at the zoning point and remove annexation altogether from the wording?
It would just remove annexation altogether, and the zoning application would require that neighborhood meeting. So yeah, it wouldn't be that you'd require the neighborhood meeting with an annexation if they're doing zoning, because you've already gotten
The
it.
zoning's already there.
Yeah.
Ready for your statements?
Sure.
Okay.
A few comments, statements. Commissioner, I agree with what you're saying. I think it makes sense maybe to pull the annexations out of the proposed ordinance. If they're just doing a simple sewer tap or something, they can go through the process to do that. But if they're going to rezone for whatever reason, then the neighborhood meeting would be required for the rezoning. I think the QR code is an excellent idea. I've seen that in other communities where they're placing it on different documents. You can scan it, get directly to the information you're looking for. I don't think that this type of neighborhood meeting, I don't think a virtual meeting would work well, because like Cameron mentioned, I think you'd have to have a formal presentation. And if you did that at 4 p.m. and then someone shows up at 5:15, and then it's what I've noticed in public neighborhood meetings, it's just kind of a come and go open house. And there's 3 or 4 staff or, the owners and their professionals or whoever stand around, maybe some displays, maybe not displays. And so it's kind of, you just ask questions informally. So I'm not sure virtual would work well. You could leave it as an option, but I'm not sure how that would work. And then, I think to add to what Adam went to your questions about, where's this coming from? I think another, entity that has an interest in this is obviously the neighborhood. I think the neighbors simply want information. They want, and I've been to neighborhood meetings where, they can't or they won't disclose. There was one just recently within the last 2 months, it was for a church, and the neighbors want to know what the denomination was, and they wouldn't tell them, which I think they have no right to know that, and you're going to support one or the other. But so I think you can still have a neighborhood meeting and keep things confidential if you have a new, big box coming into town or whatever the case may be. And I guess I'll just add to that. In the last, I've been going to every one of the Springfield Planning and Zoning Commission meetings for the last 3 years. And I would say well over 80% have neighbors attend the neighborhood meeting. it's not a 5% showing up. There are some where nobody shows up. So, I don't discount that, but the vast majority of them, handful of neighbors up to, dozens of neighbors show up, ask questions, they can kind of tend to resolve it. I think someone's right to, maybe negotiate is the wrong word. I think you could simply say the developers, would work with the neighbors and try to, come to some sort of, consensus or compromise. But I think it's a great opportunity for neighbors to get answers to their questions, for the developers and the property owners to explain what they're trying to do, to help ease concerns and things. And I think we've tried it. I think every one of these, it's suggested that they talk with the neighbors, but in the year or so I've been doing this, I can't think of one off the top of my head where someone's come up here and said they met with the neighborhood. They making it a suggestion or it just doesn't work, And so I think there needs to be a little more, teeth in it. And I think this is a good start. It's not perfect. I think if you work it, to Lexi's point, if you work it, or Lacey's point, if you work it in your timeline, there's plenty of time from when you're working with city staff that you can have your neighborhood meeting, and it hopefully wouldn't hold you up. There is a little bit of additional expense, but depending on where you have it and how you do it. But anyway, I think this is something that's needed. I think that the neighborhood and stuff really want to see something like this. And anyway, I plan to support it.
Thank you. Anyone else comment? Any additional questions? Cameron, if we would want to simply remove annexations from the wording in B, can we just do that and make an adjustment during the approval process? Do we need to table it, change it and bring it back? What's the process here?
I believe you can do it either way. You can make the motion to approve with omitting it being required on annexations, or however, staff can go back and draft some revisions and bring back to the commission at the next meeting to consider. However, and if there's additional comments that staff needs to look at, like some of the things that were brought up, we can definitely look at that as well. One thing I would bring up, I think we might want to give some additional thought to, for instance, if someone has one single family lot that's say it's a 1/4 acre lot where they're changing the zoning or coming in, we might want to think about those. I don't know if it's a size of acreage requirement or if it's a specific number of lots. It's just kind of a gray area. In discussing that in the past, staff just moved forward with treating it all equally and not trying to treat someone separate from another. So it's kind of some thoughts there might be given.
I think that's a great idea personally. I think I would, barring being incorrect here, I think we could table this for a month and ask for revisions and definitely the annexations to be removed. But you brought up a great point with the single lot accommodation to simply tap into, whether it be sewer, water, or whatever. I think that's a great idea. So is that appropriate? I think we'd be fine to do that.
Very appropriate. And I would appreciate any comments sent to us for thoughts from the
And I
commission
would
too.
like to, before I make it official, please email thoughts, concerns, be very specific and send them to Cameron and to Megan's attention. And let's get this thing right before we move on. So I go ahead and make a motion to table. Whoop, you absolutely can. I'm interruptible. Especially since you gave me honey.
So my thoughts are on this, and I don't have a lot of experience on having to do this sort of process myself, except for one. And that is because I have a property in Springfield, and they do require something like this type of notification, and I have not gone through the full process yet. But it is just, for example, it's a vacation of an alleyway that is not being used. So it's really, nobody would even know that it's an alleyway. It wasn't mentioned. So Springfield has this layer of red tape required for me to apply for a vacation of that alley, which is fine. But it's just such a small minuscule thing that really is only affecting me and the other neighbor, and that's it. So I just wonder if this is a requirement, how many little things are we not mentioning that it's gonna just clog up the process when it's not really necessary, in my opinion. I know, as being a commissioner here for 3 years and getting these reports, we kind of have an idea on which one of these meetings we're gonna end up staying late at, and we could tell our spouses, hey, don't expect me home soon. So I kind of feel like that should be more of an optional, or like the first gentleman said, shouldn't be required for everybody. But there's certain things that we have an idea that's gonna be maybe a little messy or a little muddy. So I think without just saying that the city should pick and choose, I think it should just be strongly suggested for certain applicants. I think that'd be a lot easier and not have to bog the system for everything that comes across, definitely for annexations. But then since, if they want to get in the city, they need to do the rezoning part. And it's not really a big deal, and it's more a relationship between the city and the individual. So it doesn't need to be a big stir pot of, information or disclosure. We do enough disclosures to let people know that we have these meetings. So I don't think it needs the extra layer every single time for all of these applications. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
The only thing I might offer along with that I see transverse of most of what you said. If we dial down too deep, we'll never get done. We'll keep thinking of, well, this doesn't apply, that doesn't apply. We got to be really careful with our specificity. Is that a word? So and it's going to be tough, but I think we can come up with a plan to fit the majority of what we're trying to obtain here, is to make it a better process. That's all we're wanting, is a better process from start to finish.
Yeah.
But we don't want to get too deep in the weeds, because if we do, we're not going to help anybody if we do that.
I could see on the vacation of right of way being treated similar to the annexation and maybe not requiring that at all. I think since I've been there, there's been 3 vacation requests. One was a private residence. The other 2 were the county, near the county justice center. In those cases, it would be between the applicant and the city or the ownership of the right of way, not necessarily a developer or a neighbor. So if it makes it cleaner, I could see those being removed from this requirement. And it was something that was determined or copied over from the example ordinance from Springfield. So.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish my motion to table the amending of municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 405 zoning regulations by enacting 1 new section 405.080 neighborhood meetings till our next meeting, with request of everyone sending suggestions and thoughts. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, Megan, please.
Trevor Branch.
Aye.
Keith Renfro.
Aye.
Jeff Garrison.
Aye.
Chad Zickel.
Aye.
Calvin Goldberg is absent. Wim Hope.
Aye.
Alexi Pavlov is absent. Lacey Colbert. Aye. Adam Graham.
Aye.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty simple after that. Discussion, I'll go ahead and move to any commission comments that would like to be made this evening, and I will start. This is Wim's last meeting. You sure? You sure? Okay.
I saw that.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you've done for us the last 3 years. I was glad to get to know you.
Appreciate you guys. Definitely learned a lot.
There's a lot yet to learn for me. It's, it doesn't end here. Anyone else? Chad? Sir. Adam? Lacey? Trevor? Pete? Staff? Cameron?
Just following up on the commission, staff is working with the mayor to fill a seat. So hopefully by the March meeting, we'll have a new member to the commission that will be introduced.
Thank you. Look forward to that. Megan?
Oh, just one point of clarification, we do actually have QR codes on the sign. So.
Look at you go.
It was actually the.
Does it link to the actual application?
It links to the page that has all the lists and it says 2024 public notices. And so you just drop down and pick.
Well, I dropped down and it showed that this meeting was last Thursday too, so,
You can look into that.
Okay.
okay. But yeah, if it would go directly to that page would be great.
Yeah.
What, one clarification, I believe it probably takes you to the public notice because the packet's not prepared when those signs get posted.
That's.
So, so yeah, but we could add a disclaimer on there to where to find the packet once it gets uploaded.
Okay, good deal. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours if you want it.
No, I'm good. I'm serious.
You don't want it.
Okay.
Well, we just lack one thing. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Don't everybody jump at once. First by Pete, second by
I'll second it.
last form of approval. And they all said. Aye. Thank you, everyone.